Really didn't fancy being on camera today, but I do need to show off the fact Z-Manzilla put me husband on a t-shirt. I think that's available at Mercenary Creative. Anyway, I've not played Balatro, because I've more or less got dyscalculia. I can't do numbers at all, they terrify me. But I do know it's bloody excellent, I do know it's a bloody success, and I do know that's fertile ground for the predators of the game industry to start smacking their chops. It's a good shirt. If you ever want a snapshot of how unprepared and ill-equipped game industry leaders are to lead the game industry, watch them react with gormless thirst when a game like Vampire Survivors or Balatro comes along. Watch as they glom onto a game that became wildly popular without their involvement and try to feed off the scraps left in its wake. Watch as they completely miss the point of why those games became as popular as they did and copy what's just been done, instead of consider that these games sold amazingly because they were doing something else. As far back as the days of publishers trying to munch on Call of Duty's muff, I've been repeating one very simple lesson. Market leaders lead. They don't follow. Did they listen though? Like Bobby Kotick's spider egg-filled nutsack they did. A well-known developer didn't make Vampire Survivors. A big publisher didn't put out Balatro. These games didn't come from the same world as gaming's executive class, who are forever behind the curve because the only world they deign to comprehend is their own little planetoid of myopia. It is an objective fact that the business side of video games is operated by semi-sapient beef tips with baby brains. This show now catalogues over a decade of publishers continually repeating mistakes, executives saying and doing ignorant things, and investors ravaging the long-term sustainability of video games with their short-term impulsivity. And anyone who thinks the ones running this industry into the ground are anything approaching smart is as baby-brained as they are. But that's just because they're the only ones who think that. One of the reasons I've become increasingly more insulting toward game industry leadership is that I've reached a point of near uncontrollable frustration with their overwhelming imbecility and inability to learn from their mistakes. It's like watching that guy from the live-action Popeye movie kicking his hat every time he tries to pick it up. It's funny at first, but I guarantee you that after 30 minutes of watching him do it, you'll just want to scream, "Pick your fucking hat up properly, you incompetent piece of shit! How are you not understanding how to pick a hat up off the ground? It's not that fucking hard!" Oh, I went dizzy then. Well, I've gone dizzy. It's an apt metaphor, the hat-kicking guy, for it is the exact situation so-called biz-dev people are in when they start desperately grasping for the next big hit video game. What they want is forever out of reach, and their inability to touch it is entirely their own clownish fault. This is certainly what investors are doing when they're running around looking for what they call the next Balatro. Or should I say the next Bahatro? No, I should say the next Balatro. It's GDC time, or at least it is if you're not one of the non-American developers who cancelled their attendance because they're not taking any chances flying to that fuck dump of a nation. Yes, the Game Developers Conference, a place for studios to ply, talent to schmooze, and morons with too much money and not enough of anything else to show their ass. Today's video was inspired by a post on Blue Sky that commented on the fact investy types are currently sniffing around like hungry hounds in an attempt to jump on board the Balatro gravy train. A gravy train that, by the by, has an occupancy of exactly 1. Bruno Diaz saliently wrote, Publisher BizDev people at events like GDC and DICE trying to sign the next Balatro should realise that statistically the developer of the next Balatro you need to be talking to isn't at GDC or DICE talking to BizDev guys seeking 2 million plus in funding. Recent years have seen a number of indie games come proverbially out of nowhere to become jaw-droppingly huge successes, of which Balatro is one of the recent biggest. There are many reasons why investors are looking for love in all the wrong places, and many reasons why those places are wrong. In fact, as I talk, I'm having a hell of a time choosing where to start here. I guess the best point to start with is the one I just made a moment ago when I said Balatro and similar hits came out of nowhere. That is to say, their point of origin was explicitly not the same old places with the same old faces. You see, these games came from somewhere, but somewhere looks an awful lot like nowhere when you're never there. Like Diaz said, chances are that the so-called Next Balatro will come from well outside the traditional game publishing sphere. They're not just independent from publisher ownership, but from the entire game industry. Investors believe a game like Balatro or Vampire Survivors or Hades happens right under their noses. But the fact is plain to anybody who can see an inch in front of theirs, Balatro was not under their noses. Balatro was nowhere near their stupid fucking heads. Why? Because the traditional game industry is not just inhospitable to a game like Balatro these days, it's openly fucking hostile to it. So-called investors in the game industry don't actually want to invest in the game industry. Many years ago they sorta did, but we're long past the point of them being anything other than investors in name only. See, here's how so-called investment in the game industry works these days. At least according to pretty much every bloody developer I know.
It's just a jump to the left.
In order to get your game picked up by a publisher, you need to have already developed most of it. They're gonna wanna see a full-fledged working build, which invariably means much of the game's already been paid for out of your own pocket. Your game also needs to be something they've seen before, because they're only interested in a proven formula. So, you need to have done all the work, put in all the money, and demonstrated a provable measure of success before they'll give you a shot. And you may well wonder how it could even be called investment at this point, and the answer is because business people are fucking aliens. Imagine choosing to become so increasingly obsolete, so functionally useless, and then wondering why the developers of promising, inventive games don't fucking bother with you anymore, making lots of money on their own terms without you helping yourself to an ill-gotten cut. What they do is not investment. It's leeching. They are tantamount to freeloaders at this point. They want to put in as little of their own funding as possible so they can sit back and maximise the returns. They don't want risk, they don't want speculation, they want safe, proven, and easy. And they're so fucking stupid, so unable to examine their own repetitive behaviour, that they're still consistently surprised when exactly the kind of games they'd have never wanted to be involved with become huge hits without their involvement. Why can't we find something we haven't seen before? We tried looking where we always look. God, it's like watching someone who insists on exclusively eating sausages wonder why there's not a banana in their mouth. To anybody with a rational working mind, seeing brand new ideas coming from untapped places and succeeding as a result might be motivation to refresh one's strategy and start investing in areas that hadn't been considered before. But to these freaks of decency, the lesson learned is, Balatro make money, we make money if copy Balatro. And that brings us to the other fucking problem. Publishers don't actually want what they say they want. BizDev types will never find the next Balatro because they're too busy looking for the old Balatro in a new skin. They fancy themselves as speculative types, but they're quite the opposite. They're reactive. They wait for a new thing to show them how it's done, and then it's a case of monkey see, monkey publish. They lack the imagination or the foresight to see potential in something they haven't seen before, and that's why the next Balatro eludes them. They care about the last, not the next. It's why they're looking in the same places they've always looked and finding the same games they've always found. They don't know any other way, and their unimaginative minds are too mechanical to conceive of doing something different. Balatro isn't a hit because it tried to be Balatro. Balatro is a hit because Balatro is Balatro, and the next indie hit will be a hit because it's whatever it is instead of something that's trying to be Balatro. It sounds really bloody obvious, I know, but it seems to be so for everybody but the people trying hardest to capitalise on these games. Responding to my own rants on Blue Sky about this, many people made the incredibly important point that a game like Balatro couldn't even be made with their involvement if they spotted it. They'd fuck with it too much, insist on meddling, they'd apply their preconceptions and unimaginative habits to the project, take the new and twist it until it resembles the old, make it a live service like they try to make everything. You think an EA or an Activision would have let Vampire Survivors be Vampire Survivors? All that content and all those characters not gated behind a dozen paywalls? You think they'd have been able to understand the game's core concept when it was brand new to them? When it didn't have that proven formula their risk-averse arses need to see? You know they'd have immediately demanded an attack button. I mean, just look at how many Survive 'em Ups came out and had just that, edging the genre closer and closer to a familiar traditional shoot 'em up. So many trend chasers, including indie ones by the way, literally don't get the trend they're chasing. Vampire Hunters is pretty great though. Shameless, but great. The case of Vampire Survivors is a very explicit example of a game that exists in spite of the game industry. It was designed to generate dopamine in a way that rejected slot machines and gambling in a market that only wants to emulate them. It literally couldn't be made with a major publisher, a company that stands against everything the developer's trying to do. Punkel's founder Luca told me quite recently, in fact, that I can take a measure of credit for the company's current way of running a business, as he wanted Punkel to be very exactly not the kind of company I've criticised in my work over the years. Not only do I take a massive amount of pride in having had that influence, I think the influence of Stephanie Sterling couldn't be any more clear an indication of something existing in spite of mainstream industry sensibilities. Take it from a gal whose YouTube channel has been completely and utterly irreparably fucked and yet has managed to stay in business for years regardless. I know a thing or two about sustaining while keeping to principles and ethics. I certainly know a fuck sight more about it than the scumtubs whose unprincipled unethical behaviour has actively fucked the sustainability of an entire multi-billion-dollar industry. But as I like to say, being better than a corporate parasite isn't much of a brag when pretty much all of us can legitimately say it. If you know enough to understand that the best way to not repeatedly punch yourself in the head is to not punch your own head repeatedly, you know better than a video game corpo. Here's a thought exercise actually, to test if you've got more self-restraint and foresight than them. You're watching someone successfully playing keepy-uppy with a soccer ball. Do you A, respect what they're doing works, or B, shit your pants, reach into your underwear behind yourself to scoop out a handful of hot dump and hurl that premium bum clay at the person who was doing just fine without ya? You know, I legit started this bit with the intent to draw an actual direct metaphor and make a point about executive meddling, but then I thought, nah, it made just as good a point with poo. Perhaps most infuriating of all is that publishers have the power to find the Vampire Survivors and Hadeses and Balatros of the world if they just used that power correctly. Chris Lau Mason's response to me pretty much nails it. Rather than scouring GDC and DICE for prospects that literally aren't there, they could be funding indie festivals, creating events that aren't prohibitively expensive or excludingly privileged, so the unknown developers whose games come out of nowhere actually have somewhere to come from. They have the resources to quite easily grow their own environments in which the mythical Next Balatro can flourish. But that requires proactivity. That requires creativity. Most crucially of all, it requires investment. And as we've all just learned, there's nothing an investor works harder to avoid than actually investing in something. Rather than build this environment of creativity, publishers have instead built a place where creation itself goes to die. It's harder than ever to get funding for a game, and next to impossible if you're not making a game that hasn't been done before, because publishers don't understand what innovation is beyond its use as a buzzword. And that's before we get into how publishers are embracing things like AI more and more, opting for plagiaristic cannibalization of existing creativity, because then they don't have to pay anybody. Wanton disrespect for the talent that makes the games they're searching for. The truly remarkable thing is, when a small studio does come out of nowhere and scores a company-boosting hit, they so often pay it forward. More than one indie developer has used their own commercial success to start funding studios smaller than they are, doing the actual investment that so-called investors are too chicken shit to do. It's been inspiring to see these growing studios not only refuse to pull the ladder up behind them, but actively reach their hands back down to hoist others up the rungs. There is a very, very important lesson we should learn from that. If we want to see the garden grow, we have to plant the seeds ourselves. We can't rely on the money maggots to help anyone but the money maggots. Actually, that's not accurate. They can't even help themselves anymore. They're their own worst enemy, and they can't even see it. Big publishers elbowed their way into being the gatekeepers of success, and over the years they did a good job convincing us all that the only way to release a hit game is through them. But as the business they vandalized collapses around them, they have proven not only unequal to the task, they've become an outright threat to the games they want to get their hands on. Look what they do to the studios they swallow up only to shut down. Look what they do to saturate the market to unsustainable levels when they latch onto someone else's good idea. They're the poison in the well, and the well is where they languish, while those who want to win are splashing around in cleaner waters. BizDev bullshitters are living evidence of their own failure, proving why they're not qualified with everything they think say, and do. Also, Bobby Kotick is a complete cunt. Yeah, that'll do. Tired now. Thank God for me. I don't like the game industry very much.